guest this week on Veterans Chronicles is retired U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel William Bonelli. He is also a veteran of World War II. He's a survivor of the attack on Pearl Harbor, and he was a member of a B-17 bomber crew, and we'll be talking about all of that in our conversation today. Colonel, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Where were you born and raised, sir?
Indiana, Pennsylvania, near Pittsburgh, about 30 miles east in that area.
Was there a history of military service in your family?
No, none that I know of.
You joined the Army Air Corps, prior to Pearl Harbor. Why did you join, and why did you join the Army Air Corps?
Goodness, Hitler was in the news. It was pretty obvious that we were going to be in a war, that you couldn't get around that. And at the time, I would say there was a hell of a depression going on at that time. People wondered where they were going to get the next dollar. It was that bad. And I thought it was time for me to hit the road.
How old were you when you joined, sir?
After walking around a few days with a dime in my pocket, walked into the recruiting office, and I said to the sergeant, "I'll sign up if you can get me near airplanes." He got on the phone, spent about an hour or more, and then he said to me, "There's no place in the state side. You'll have to go to Hawaii." I said, "I'll take it." Sure enough, I was sworn in again in Harrisburg, and was on a boat around through the Panama Canal, Frisco, and then Hawaii. Things were very bad, even in the military. Believe this or not, I have to tell you. My pay was $30 a month, but for the first 4 months, they cut my pay to $21. The politicians, of course, looking for money, cut my pay to $21 for the first 4 months. and then I got back to my $30 a month. And I did my darndest to get into aircraft maintenance training, to become an aircraft mechanic. And that took a few months to get lined up to go to the aircraft maintenance course in Hawaii. Finally, I did somewhere in 41. I'm now an aircraft mechanic. And of course, December 7, 41, as you well know, that changed things quite a bit. Do you want me to tell you of any incidents?
Oh, absolutely. Let's
Absolutely.
start with what you were doing that morning and when you realized something was different.
Well, I would like to tell you what I was doing that night. Saturday night, December 6th, downtown Honolulu was loaded with sailors. First time I had ever seen it in over a year that I was already there. So crowded. The shore patrol was taking the inebriated back to the boats, and I understand putting them in a brig. And after the brig was filled up, they laid them out on the deck. Now, I heard that, but I believe it. I actually believe it. That night, I ended up on the north side of the island of Oahu, O-A-H-U, and where we had a recreational facility. It was a total flop. We had barracks and a couple thousand mosquitoes, but no messing facilities or anything like that. But then we decided to spend the night there, and early Sunday morning, go get breakfast at Hickam Field. But the reason for me wanting to tell you this, on the beach was a vehicle, and I could see through the windows out over the sea, 2 heads in the front and 2 heads in the back. But before that, I thought it was a lover's rendezvous. I'm going to go over there and get on the running board and rock the boat, and then run away laughing and what have you. But when I got within about 50 feet of that car and I noticed those four heads motionless, I thought something was odd here. And I'm now already backing up away from that. Four people. I'm sure one of them would have grabbed me if I had got on that running board. As I was backing away, I noticed two antennas, whip antennas, on each corner of the rear bumper. How high up they went, I don't know, but they did go up high, and I felt something sinister. So then I backed up real fast, turned around, and ran as fast as I could to get away from there, maybe 400 or 500 feet, and got behind a palm tree to see if anybody got out of the car. Nobody got out of the car, so I guess they didn't see me. Now, the reason I want to mention that little incident is I learned maybe just 5, 6, 7 years ago, reading a book, that General George C. Marshall, head of the Chief of Staff at the time, sent a message to Kimmel, Navy, and Short, Army, to anticipate activity, but not pass this information to the lower ranking officers. Well, here I'm an enlisted man, I'm not an officer, which, by the way, I would have to say exonerates the lieutenant in charge of the 5 radar stations. When they were the one located at Diamond Head, the radar operator was trying to tell the lieutenant what he was seeing coming that morning, and the lieutenant ignored it because there were 12, I later learned, 12 B-17s, Flying Fortresses, on their way to Honolulu. And so that's what the lieutenant, on the basis of that, dismissed what the radar operator had to say. You get the picture?
Yes.
And I mention that is if I had known about that communique, I think I would have been able to put 2 and 2 together. That morning, we were on our way and approaching Wheeler Field, which is just a wee bit north of Pearl Harbor itself, and Hickam Field. I noticed 3 zeros overhead. I didn't know they were Japanese. I saw the red ball, and I said to my buddies, I said, wonder who those airplanes belong to. I've never seen them before. And I said jokingly, at least I thought so, I said, we might be at war. About 4 or 5 minutes later, we sure were at war. The Navy really took a hell of a beating. There's no 2 ways about it. Oh, they just dive bombed the heck out of the battleships parked around Ford Island inside of Pearl Harbor. And when I look back, I do want to say that the reason for a lot of sailors downtown Saturday night was perhaps to show strength, and maybe the top brass figured that if there was any activity, it would be from within instead of from without. And here Yamamoto's fleet is about 200-300 miles north of the island of Oahu. I could go on, but I'll stop on Pearl Harbor right there.
Let me back up just a minute just to
Sure.
fill in some details. So, first of all, where were you standing with your buddy when you saw those zeros come through?
We were in the car, and I'm looking up, and there they go, towards Wheeler Field. We were approaching Wheeler Field.
You saw them bomb the battleships.
Oh, yeah, hell yes.
Okay. So then what do you do? Where did you go?
I headed to the main gate, got in, went to the orderly room, and this is Sunday now, no duty, but the adjutant was there. And I asked the adjutant, there was about 3 or 4 of us was in the orderly room and says, what shall we do? And he said, be damned if I know. But anyhow, I went to the supply to get a rifle, to get a gun, period. Well, first I tried to go across the parade ground to the big barracks for protection, which was a dumb thing on my part to do because they were trying to torpedo the large barracks. And that's one time that I was fired on. I ran in front of the 1-0 strafing the barracks also. And so I lucked out. He didn't let me. I turned around and went back to the orderly room where the supply office was and to get a gun and what have you. And here's a lineup already forming. And that was another time that the Zeros strafed the line. And several were hit, but no fatalities. And the supply sergeant says rank, name, and serial number, sign. Well, after that strafing, he says, come and get them. So I ended up finally with a rifle and 2 belts of 30 caliber over my shoulders. I guess I must have looked like Pancho Villa or something like that. And I got me a 45 pistol and my pocket full of 45 caliber shells and what have you. And I was ready for street to street, corner to corner activity. But here, there was no activity. I have to say this, even though Yamamoto was very successful, 100% successful in his attack, but he gave it up, in my opinion, this is my opinion now, by pulling all of his troops out back on board ship and left. Had I been Yamamoto, I would have had about 1 or 2 shiploads of kamikaze type mentalities, put them on the island and to round up the rest of us, which they could have done. And they would have had that island for another 10 years. But here Yamamoto pulls all of his troops and heads back towards Japan. I couldn't believe it. He was successful, but he gave up his victory.
Didn't follow up on it.
Yeah, I'm glad you're following me.
Let's take a quick break, and we'll come right back with much more of the story of Lieutenant Colonel Bill Bonelli on Veterans Chronicles. Welcome back to Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corumbus. Thanks so much for being with us. Our guest this week is Bill Bonelli, retired U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel, veteran of the attack on Pearl Harbor, and the B-17 bomber, which we just found out in dramatic fashion. You got reprimanded a little bit for making your plane of choice 3 times on your form, but once you explained it, you got the thumbs up. So now you're on your way to Hobbs, New Mexico. What happens next?
That's where I became my first pilot on the B-17. From there, I was sent to Tampa, Florida, Plant Park, and was given a crew, co-pilot, bombardier, navigator, and 6 gunners. And then, let me tell you about my bombardier, very interesting. He was a first lieutenant, he outranked me, and I said, what in the world are they doing to me? And then I noticed that he had a good gift of gab, and I thought, well, that'll come in handy. He can entertain the crew. Well, I concentrate on 3 things: survival, survival, survival. Then I learned he was an instructor bombardier at Deming, New Mexico, near the border. And I thought, well, how lucky can I get? Because he knew how to manipulate that northern bomb site. And so I was very thankful. Okay, from there we went to Gulfport, Mississippi, combat crew training. After I completed the combat training, I was sent to Hunter Field, Georgia, picked up a new B-17, And now I was on my way to Italy via Grenier, New Hampshire, Gander, Newfoundland, and across the ocean to the Azores, a bunch of islands just west of Lisbon, Portugal. And from the Azores down to Morocco, Northwest Africa, Marrakech. And then from there to Tunis, North Central Africa. And then finally, north, about 10 degrees north, to Foggia, Italy.
And what date is this? What year, what month?
Oh, I arrived Italy somewhere in September of 44. After 4 or 5 flights getting checked out, the guy checking me out, I had to check him out. I was now with my own crew, and after a couple of missions, I was asked, or I'm not quite sure whether I was asked or told to fly squadron lead. So 2 flights, I was checked out as squadron lead. They said, "You're now a squadron lead." And I thought it was rather early in the game, but that was all right with me. And the reason for saying that is I flew a total of 21 squadron leads. In my last one, a group lead, 28 B-17s. However, I got to tell you this about my second sortie as squadron lead, Charlie Squadron, Abel, Baker, Charlie, Dog Squadron, 4 squadrons. Mostly I flew Charlie Squadron. About my second sortie, I almost got blown out of the sky. I didn't know whether or not I was going to make it home. And this is where being a mechanic on the B-70 helped quite a bit, by the way. But anyhow, I finally got back. Now I thought, I lied awake at night. Something's wrong here. The position of Charlie Squadron lead, that's the 3rd squadron in a row, in line, squadrons in line, to me was a pretty dumb maneuver. It was without a doubt in my mind flying Baker, Charlie, Dog lead, kamikaze, suicide. No question about it. Once the Germans were darn good with that 88 millimeter. They knew how to use it. They knew how to calibrate or adjust it or tune it to hit the squadron lead. They did know that the Norden bomb sight was in the lead, only in the lead aircraft, lead squadron. And once they picked up the lead Able aircraft track to the target, they now know pretty closely where the Baker lead and the Charlie lead and the Dog lead aircraft would be. It was that simple. There it is. And I was now going to say, here, take this squadron lead because I want to fly loose and jam it. But after, as I said, lying awake at night for 4 or 5 nights, I said to my bombardier at breakfast, Andy, Fred Anderson, let's go for a walk. I got a question. Of course, I already knew the answer to the question. What I wanted to establish, what I'm going to do and what I've got to say, keep it confidential, just between the two of us. I emphasized that more than anything else. So I said to Andy, will you have a problem if I extend my base leg before turning on to a track other than the designated to the target? In other words, putting it in numbers, let's say the designated course was, as I use the numbers, easy to understand, 030 degrees. Well, if I kept going on my base leg, then turn, I'd be coming in offset. You follow me? Mm-hmm. In other words, here would be the designated track, but I would go extend the base leg and come in on my track to the target, you see. He picked it up right away, and he knew why. And he said, I agree, I got you. If it hadn't been for that maneuver on my part, I wouldn't be sitting here today. And now, how do I know this? Not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times. I would say about 9 or 10 times that I witnessed. It was more, but what I witnessed when I'm on my final track to the target and I take my eyes off my instruments and glance to my right where I'm supposed to be or to the left where I'm supposed to be, pop, 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 right where in the hell I was supposed to be. Pop. 3 or 4 bursts. They would have been direct hits. Now, direct hits is what breaks you up. If it hits your tank, the fuel explodes. You're a ball of fire. Or break your spar. You're now in pieces. You're now spinning in. That's what would happen. So I would have to say more than 9 or 10 times that I managed to avoid. I was going to go to the higher headquarters and say, look, I have a plan. Let's spread. But I decided to keep my mouth shut because I might have gotten a different order that I didn't like. It would prevent me from what I am already doing. My dog squadron is, according to my tail gunner, is always following me. So now I've got 2 squadrons out of the 4 squadrons offset. And I stopped losing aircraft. What more could you want? I felt that there was, on the part of the command, my guts, your blood, that kind of an attitude. Let me give you an incident. Front Prona. We were on final track, and my bomber said, Bonelli, there's no bridge, 400-foot bridge. There's no bridge there. I'm positive I see the approach from the banks, but there's no bridge. What do you want me to do? And I said, well, which side of the river has the largest buildings, commercial buildings? He said, the left side. And I said, put your crosshairs on it. About a week and a half later, a colonel in the high command, so to speak, came over to me and said, if you had put your crosshairs in the middle of the river, my score would have been higher. You see what I mean? I got 95% of the bombs, which was a good, damn good, within the 1,000-foot circle as measured from the river. But in this case, had I had my bombardier aim at the middle of the river with all 100% of the bombs, they were pretty well balled up. Yes, he would have gotten a little higher score. But some of them were more concerned about their medals. I got to tell you that. I'm angry about that. If I sound angry, I am angry, because that's just the way it was.
Well, so your instincts were correct, not to ask for permission to do it your way.
Yeah.
How did your crew react? Besides your bombardier, how did the rest of your crew react to your strategy?
I'm not sure they knew. Like I said, I kept it confidential just between myself and the bombardier.
Okay. They didn't notice you were leaving formation?
Oh, no. Okay. Now, that's an interesting point right there. At 30,000, 20,000, 25,000, 30,000 feet, what you just thought of does not exist. They're not concerned. They're in no way thinking of what the other guy's supposed to be doing. They're trying to protect themselves. It's altogether a different attitude. As for anyone, I certainly did at no time determine whether this guy should have or shouldn't have, or where he was or wasn't. Even if he was excessively loose, so what?
You're doing your job, they're doing their job.
That's right. That's what it boiled down to. At no time did I criticize anyone or found a difference. Sure, we were loose at times, many times. I'm the only one that could put his wingtip in the other B-17's waist window. I think that's why I did that when I was getting checked out in the beginning of the game. I was able to do that, and this pilot was supposed to be checking me out. He was one of those like this. He was passing through, I remember one time passing through 17,000 feet. He was sweating. I mean, and I'm cold, sitting over here in the co-pilot seat for this particular trip. And so I tap him on the shoulder, have a cigarette, and I'll fly it. And 17,000, very little oxygen. We finally got turned on 100% oxygen to get the lighter lit, and then finally got his cigarette lit. And man, he dragged on that cigarette. He needed that nicotine so badly. Hell, the ash was red ash was that long. He's sucking on that cigarette, And I think that had something to do why I was asked to be a squadron commander, because, hell, except for landing, takeoff, or turbulence, or so, you only need 2 fingers to fly. Just keep it trimmed up, you see it.
What were your most common targets? Was there some place you went over and over?
In my case, mostly marshalling yards, railroad yards, and some bridges. Now, I have bombed. Oh, well, that was marshalling yard, too. I was going to point out that I bombed at night a single aircraft using radar. The lead aircraft had, only the lead aircraft had the Norden bomb sight and radar. I did not have a ball turret gunner. Mm-hmm. I lost him when I became a squadron lead pilot. And I have to tell you, I prefer that radar for navigation. Matter of fact, I bombed the marshalling yard at Vienna in thunderstorms. And that bugged the hell out of me, carrying bombs in a thunderstorm. Hell, the brackets could break loose, and hang up in the bomb bay. That kind of stuff. But I managed to do it using the radar. It was a 3-way conversation. The radar gave me steers to the target, and then he also told the bombardier when I would be over a certain point, physically over a certain point on the ground, then the bombardier, with his judgment, would know how much greater distance it would be before the bomb hit the ground, that kind of stuff. It was, so I was a little burned up about that one. I said next morning, I said to my immediate commander, I said, what did I accomplish last night? He didn't answer me. 10 minutes later, I said, what did I accomplish last night? And he said, the commander and so-and-so wanted them to know we could bomb any damn time we wanted to. My guts, your blood, that kind of stuff. And well, why did they even take 6 gunners? Messerschmitts don't fly at night, and especially in weather conditions. So why did I have 6 men in fear?
How many missions did you fly overall?
30 sorties.
Yes, sir.
Mission in the 8th Air Force, England, you could have 2 missions for 1 sortie, depending upon the severity of the trip. And in the 15th Air Force, at the time I was there, it was an actual trip, sortie. So we used the word sortie. If they had been in England, that might have been double. I might have had 60. You see what I mean? But I had made 30 trips, sorties.
And once you reached that 30, what happened?
35, 5 more, I would come home. Hitler blew his brains out. My last flight was 23 April, and that was my one group lead, 28 B-17s. And I think that was no, there was a couple others just after that. That's right. But not, I don't think we went into May at all. And I believe it was May somewhere there, first part of May, where Hitler blew his nut, then the war was over.
Well, May 8th is, VE Day, so it's right around that time. You're right.
I'd like to tell you another interesting story.
Sure.
I asked to stay in Europe for about a month or two because I wanted to see Europe from the ground. But anyhow, I didn't. I was allowed, 4 captains, 4 squadron lead, we were allowed to take a B-17 on a trip, recreational purposes. You've never heard of that, using government. And it was signed by General Twining. That I was, no per diem though, but I was allowed to take a B-17 to Israel and Cairo. I got to walk up the steps Christ walked up and a few other things. And in Egypt, I got to inside that big pyramid. That few people get inside. I had to almost crawl to get in there. They picked all the cement off trying to find a built-in entrance. Couldn't find one, so they cut a hole in. So okay. I almost had to crawl to get inside the pyramid. And listen to this. After I was in there for about 10 minutes, I wanted to get the hell out because the way the stones were stacked, I thought it was going to collapse any minute. It had been sitting there for 5,000 years, but it sure didn't look like it to me.
Well, Mr. Bonelli, it's been a true honor having you with us today. Lastly, I know you want to add one more thing, too. What are you most proud of from your service?
I enjoyed it, every bit of it. And I'm glad I made the decision to stay in the service. At the end of the war, I had 5 years, and I thought 15 more years I can retire. I retired from the military at the age of 39. But what I was going to say there, I interrupted you. I did a lot of other things. I was not only a pilot. I spent 5 years in Headquarters Training Command. I had oversight of all A&E training for the Air Force. And at the Chinook Air Force Base, I went through the Aircraft Maintenance Officers course, 32 weeks long, equivalent to 2 weeks at Texas A&M. And then I was an instructor in it, and then I ran the course. And then I went to, this is why I ended up in Headquarters Training Command, Scott Air Force Base. From there, I had another 5 years before 20. I almost went to Korea, but then I figured I had enough of that. And one of my buddies in the Pentagon found me a slot in England. I generally was 2 years old, I think, at the time. And so I could take my family with me. I couldn't take family to Korea. And so we went to England and stationed at Bentwaters and Fakenham and what have you. This is now the Cold War. I'm now in an organization with jet fighters. I'm already checked out in jet fighters. As a matter of fact, while I was in Headquarters Training Command, I sent myself to aircraft maintenance course 2 weeks long, which I had established. And then a couple of weeks later, I sent myself to, I think it was Hobbs, to get checked out in the F-84F Thunderstreak. This aircraft delivers nuclear bomb, tactical type, small one. fully loaded, by the way, under number 1 wing pylon, 230-gallon tank. And then A-bomb under left wing also, a small A-bomb. And then under the right wing, a 420-gallon tank, almost as long as the fuselage of this fighter type, fighter bomber. It's a fighter aircraft used as a bomber, and then another 230-gallon tank on their number 4 pylon. And what I want to explain, this is all past history. It's no more with missiles. This changed the subject all the way around. And the delivery of that A-bomb was performing a loop over the target. You drive right up to the target holding 4 Gs. And then you had another instrument keeping your wings leveled in so you don't spiral out. And about 110 degrees up, the bomb releases, and then on its way down, and gives the pilot a chance to get out of there so he wouldn't get fried within the blast of the A-bomb. But that's all over with. Very interesting.
It's an amazing
I enjoyed it.
career in so many ways.
So I was checked out in many aircraft, aircraft maintenance also, including helicopters. I even went to helicopter school.
Oh, my goodness.
Every chance I got to do something like that, I took advantage of it.
You made the most of those 20 years.
You damn right I did.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you for your service to our country, and thank you so much for your time today. We greatly appreciate it. Lieutenant Colonel Bill Bonelli, U.S. Air Force retired, veteran of World War II, and also a B-17 pilot in the European theater. I'm Greg Corombos. This is Veterans Chronicles. Hi, this is Greg Corombos, and thanks for listening to Veterans Chronicles, a presentation of the American Veterans Center. For more information, please visit AmericanVeteransCenter.org. You can also follow the American Veterans Center on Facebook, and on Twitter, we're at AVC Update. Subscribe to the American Veterans Center YouTube channel for full oral histories and special features, and of course, please subscribe to the Veterans Chronicles podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and please join us next time for Veterans Chronicles.